that song. What an amazing singer. Whoever that is singing that song is
Who's
just
that?
absolutely amazing.
We got another amazing guy just waiting to talk to us.
Yeah, we do. With Tom Greco on the Skype. We think he's in Tucson, Arizona. Tom, are you there?
Not today, no.
Actually, I'm in suburban Detroit right now.
Suburban Detroit. That's not too far. You could have come here. You could have driven up the 401 and been here in person, but that's okay.
No.
We got you on the Skype. Now,
Thanks for coming on the show, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your latest book. I have it here, and just going to hold it up. So it's The End of Money and the Future of Civilization. I've read it. It's a fabulous book. And what do you mean for the rest about the end of money, and how will our economy function without money, and what do you see as the future of civilization?
Well, when I talk about the end of money, there are two meanings to that, actually. What I mean is the end of money as we've known it, the end of political money, which is virtually what everyone around the world uses, whether it's Canadian dollars or US dollars or euros or yen. All of these are political money systems. This is money that's created by the banking system in each country under the aegis of the federal government, which basically grants monopoly power to the banking system to issue money. So we're coming to the end of that era of political money, and we're coming to the end of the era of money as a physical thing. When you think about it, really, money is nothing but an accounting system. It's a way of keeping track of claims.
Yeah.
If you have a deposit in the bank, and by the way, most of the money today is in the form of bank deposits, very little of it in the form of paper notes or cash. So if you have money on deposit in a bank, really that has no substance. It's just a number on an electronic ledger, and it says you happen to have X number of dollars claim against the economy.
Right.
And if you owe a debt, the debt is again just a claim against your resources and your assets by the holder of that debt. When you think about what banks do, banks simply perform a credit clearing process, keeping track of debits and credits. Let's say your employer pays you once a month by making a direct deposit to your bank account. On the day that happens, your bank account number goes up, and then you take your checkbook or your debit card and you go shopping and you buy things and you pay your bills. Those are debits against your account.
Right.
So pluses and minuses. On the one hand, when you get paid, you have a plus credit to your account, and when you spend, you get a minus or a debit to your account.
Right. One of the
really,
sorry to interrupt there, Tom, but one of the things that I was amazed of is that the money isn't actually there. And I'm kind of new to this and still learning. I mean, I've been fortunate to have a couple of conversations with you about this, but could you just talk about that? Because I don't think a lot of people, I think some people still think that the money is actually physically there in the bank.
Sure. Money in the bank isn't really money in the bank. It's simply a claim against the bank's resources. When you deposit, let's say, paper notes, Canadian dollars in your account, the bank doesn't put those notes in a vault and wait for you to come and ask for them back. That paper substance of money is simply a physical representation of money that was first created as a bank deposit. And what the bank does, they create money by making loans.
Right.
The money you deposit in the bank really becomes additional reserves to the bank. And under the fractional reserve banking system, they can then make additional loans many times the amount of the money on deposit, the money that's been in their reserves. This all sounds rather complicated, and it does become complicated when you listen to economists and politicians talk about it. Very few people really understand money,
Yeah.
but its essence is quite simple, really. Banks create money by making loans, pure and simple. If there were no debt, if the banks did not make any loans, there would be no money.
Right. And isn't
And
it also, Tom, most of the money that's out there, or it's not really physical money, but most of it's debt. Actually, what's the exact statistic? It's over 95%?
well, yeah, virtually 95%. Money is created on the basis of debt. I'll give you an example. Let's suppose you want to buy a house. You go to a bank and you say, I'd like to get a mortgage loan to buy this house. The bank actually creates that money by making two bookkeeping entries. Let's say you want a mortgage for $200,000 on a $300,000 purchase of a house. The bank will make an asset entry on their books, which will be your $200,000 mortgage note that you sign, acknowledging that you owe the bank that amount. And then they will make a corresponding entry to your account, which will be a deposit to your account for the same amount of money. So now you have the money to buy the house.
Right.
As simple as that. You know, John Kenneth Galbraith, who was a very famous economist during the 20th century, said that the way in which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled.
Yes, and I also have heard, wasn't it Ford, Henry Ford said, if, I don't know the exact quote, but if the general population knew what was going on with the central bank, there'd be a revolution tomorrow?
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing, but...
a little bit closer to the quote is that if the people knew how the money system worked,
right.
There would be a revolution before tomorrow morning.
Whose quote is that?
So
that's Henry Ford.
Yeah, I saw that quote in that film I was telling you about last night.
Yeah.
Tom, it's Hugh here. I was telling Glenn earlier that I saw a film last night from the guys that made that Money Masters movie about how the Wizard of Oz is really a story of the fight to keep this federal central banking out of the U.S. back in the 1890s.
Yeah, the Wizard of Oz is an allegory about the battle over money. Money used to be quite a recurrent political issue, but we have all been so brainwashed to accept the existing system now, the existing central banking system, that money has not been a political issue until just recently, with people like Ron Paul raising questions about the Fed, wanting to audit the Fed, and in fact abolish the Fed. So yes, there are a number of excellent films out there that describe this situation. The Money Masters is a very good one. It's quite long, but it's well worth watching. And their more recent film about the truth of the Wizard of Oz is also well worth watching.
So, Tom, I just want to say, or I want to ask you a question, because when I see, for example, recently we witnessed things that were happening in Wisconsin with the cutbacks that they were trying to do there, and that the people were trying to fight the problem. But it seems to me that's just an example of the dysfunctionality of the current monetary system. That at some point the governments just can't raise too much money is going to interest, and the government it's destroying our civilization. And yet I'm not and I kept thinking when I saw that that's just the beginning. It's going to happen everywhere. That kind of fight at the governmental level to maintain public services. And I didn't really hear anybody in that situation, because to me the solution is what you're talking about. We need to have a new kind of currency system that's not based on debt. But how are we going to get there from here? Because the media scarcely talks about it. Ron Paul did, but he couldn't make any headway in the presidential race.
Well, let's back up a little bit. You touched on a very important point, one that I've been trying to make for more than 20 years, that we have in the dominant monetary system a debt imperative which gives rise to a growth imperative. You know, economists keep talking about economic growth as if it were something sacred. But in reality, in the physical world, nothing grows forever. Eventually, you reach a point of maturity where growth has to stop. And I've been arguing this point for a long time, that we have to transcend the growth economy and move into a steady state economy, something that's sustainable.
Right.
What has been driving economic growth is this debt-based money system, because of the interest burden that is attached to every debt upon which the creation of money is based. So you have a situation where there's never enough money in circulation for all the debtors to repay what is owed, plus the interest that's due. So you have a continual exponential growth in total debt worldwide. This isn't only a Western phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. And in my slideshows, I show the actual debt charts that indicate how debt has been growing exponentially much faster than GDP, which is a measure of total economic output. So if you compare the gross domestic product, the GDP growth, with the debt growth far outpaces GDP growth. This cannot continue forever. And I think we've reached the point of reckoning where the game is pretty much finished, that the growth economy is finished. So it's this interest-based debt system on which the creation of money is based that is causing environmental destruction, societal decay, and all kinds of problems that we need to transcend.
Right. And Tom, one of the things that really impressed me, I mean, before I joined the Toronto dollar, I really had no interest in the economy, but I started to understand, the more that I learned about it, that the economy is actually a rights issue. And you talk about the credit commons, and it really opened up my eyes, because I realized that the whole thing is really about the economy. It's the economy that drives everything. So you can't really, I've said this a couple times, you can't have a million David Suzuki foundations, but they're all working to try and change a system that is fundamentally flawed. So you have to change the system. I mean, it's great that we have all these organizations, but they might not even be necessary if we had a better system.
That's exactly right. We're trying to deal with the symptoms and not really addressing the root causes of the problem. And that's how I got interested in the money system to begin with. You know, I was 30 years ago involved in the peace and justice movement, and I made it my business to try to figure out why we have these recurrent problems of war and starvation amidst plenty, and we don't seem to be able to get beyond that. And I quickly discovered that it was the money, banking, and finance structures that basically underlie this whole problem. If we can get that right, then I think a whole lot of other things will solve themselves. We can resolve these conflicts quite easily if we get past the usury interest-based money system. Now, the way we do that is by what I call direct credit clearing. If you think about how banks clear checks amongst one another, we can take that as a point of departure. Let's say, for example, that I owe you some money. I write a check that's drawn upon my local credit union in Tucson, and I hand it over to you. You take that check and you deposit it in your local bank or credit union in Toronto, and never mind that there are different banks with different accounting systems and different countries even with different currency units. you can go ahead and deposit my check in your bank and get a credit to your account. And the banks behind the scenes will take care of settling their claims against one another. Because by accepting my check, your bank now acknowledges that my bank owes you or owes your bank something. So they take care of that all behind the scenes. We don't have to worry about it. This is a process called check clearing. And banks have been doing check clearing for eons. You know, that's part of the banking system. Now, if you think about what buyers and sellers do in the market in trading goods and services, how do we pay one another? We typically pay one another using government money, either in paper form or in checks, drawing upon our bank deposits. But we could just as easily pay each other using our own credit and do a clearing process amongst ourselves within our trading community, so that when you sell something, your account is credited, and when you buy something, your account is debited. And we don't have to use any political money at all. We don't have to use the banks at all. And this is being done by the commercial so-called barter exchanges, now called trade exchanges. And there are dozens of these in different countries around the world. They provide this service for businesses. So if you own a restaurant, you can participate in one of these trade exchanges and get what you need without spending scarce cash, without spending your scarce official dollars. And on the other hand, you provide your services and goods to other members of the association on the same credit basis without the use of official money. So this is being done. In North America, I think there are probably about 250,000 businesses that belong to one or another of these trade exchanges, and they transact close to $20 billion of goods and services a year through these exchanges.
So, Tom, I mean, that's great news. In fact, just this morning, I had a call from one of these barter exchange associations. So it's obviously happening, and that's great news. But it seems to me that the whole story of the fight, which is kind of lost history in a sense, but the fight to impose a Federal Reserve central bank on the United States, and similar fights in Canada, and that it's a control issue. There are people, a small group of people, that are benefiting tremendously, that are that get a lot of power from their control of the financial system. Do you anticipate that there's going to be a fight to do this, to open up, to reinvent the financial system?
Well, I think that we can simply make the existing system irrelevant as we build parallel systems that we can use to exchange goods and services. You know, the whole business of money, banking, and finance is being reinvented from the bottom up. As I say, these trade exchanges perform the credit clearing services so that we become, to some extent, independent of political money and banks. When people ask me what is the advantage of being part of a trade exchange, I say, well, first of all, you can get the things that you need without using your scarce cash. The things that you sell basically pay for the things that you buy without the use of cash, without the use of banks. And within a trade exchange, those businesses that qualify obtain an interest-free line of credit. Whereas if you go to the bank to borrow money to finance your inventories and accounts receivable, the bank is going to charge you interest on those loans. So we can circumvent that whole process by using this direct credit clearing approach.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's great. Tom, we want you to hang on to the line. We're going to just go quickly to a video promoting the film festival, and that'll just be about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then we're going to come right back to you and finish off.
Yeah, so that's great. And just before we do that, I just want to say bonjour Madame Denise, Diane, Michel et Françoise, et tous les élèves à l'école Horizon Jeunesse à Mississauga. Okay.
And before we go to our commercial break, I'd like to do a plug for Tom's book. Sorry, but I really want people to buy it. We're ordering a lot of copies, so they'll be available at the seminar that he's doing and the film festival. It's a great book. It's actually, honestly, I don't read a lot of books, but it's one of the most amazing books I've ever read. And I'm not even an economist, but it really inspired me. So,
okay, great. So we're going to be right back with Tom Greco right after this. Okay, welcome back. Now, who is that, Glenn?
That is Mark Cassidy, and one of the things about the Mint Film Festival is we're promoting musicians.
Right.
Because guess who's a musician?
Mark Cassidy.
Yeah, the executive director as well. So, and they're a really important part of the community, and it's so nice to see these guys there. I know them, and they're all great performers, and we're trying to profile some of the great talent in Toronto. And Mark did a great job. He was there on the March screening of Water on the Table. That was a fabulous screening. So for people that are just tuning in, Toronto Dollar is doing a film festival, and it's called the Mint Film Festival. The next screening is March 26th. The guest speaker is Tom Greco, who we have live from
Michigan.
Michigan.
Outside of Detroit, yeah.
And yeah, so he's on the line right now. We're going to get back to him, but write it down in your calendars. May 26th, 6:30 p.m. Thursday, and Tom will be doing a couple of weekend workshops as well. Just go to the Mint Film Festival, www.mintff.org, and send us an email. We'd be happy to give you all the information.
So let's get back to speaking with Tom Greco. Now, I know you got a whole bunch of questions there, Glenn, and we want to make sure we touch on all that kind of stuff. Do you want to go ahead and...
Sure. Well, there's a couple of questions that
I just think it's encouraging, while you're looking that up, that, you know, as Tom is saying, that we don't really... that the system will fall apart at some point.
It will.
The existing... And so it's just up to us to build the alternative systems in the meantime. Of course, Toronto Dollar is one of those alternative systems.
Yeah, exactly. And Transition Toronto. All of these organizations are recognizing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think now Tom's on the line now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, yeah, Tom, you talk a lot about, and we touched on it briefly, the credit commons, and it's a phrase that you use an awful lot, and it's pretty cool. I hadn't heard it before, and I want you to explain to people what you mean by restoring the credit commons. What is that?
Sure. The credit commons really is our collective credit. Every money system is supported by our collective credit. The reason why Canadian dollars have any value at all, or US dollars have any value at all, is because everybody in the Canadian dollar zone, everybody who's required to accept Canadian dollars in payment, is responsible for all Canadian dollar issuance. I'll give you an example. The U.S. government has been going deeply into debt for a long, long time, but that really kicked into high gear after the Bush tax cuts and after the financial meltdown of 2008. We saw the U.S. government budget really fall off a cliff, with expenditures vastly exceeding receipts. So the way the government covers that is by borrowing money. And so there have to be willing lenders out there. We've relied largely upon the Chinese and the Japanese and the OPEC countries to reinvest their dollar earnings in U.S. government bonds. But that's coming to an end. And so the Federal Reserve has been buying up the government debt. And when the Federal Reserve buys up government debt, it creates new money in order to do that. And worse than that, that new money that it creates goes into the banking system, giving the banks new reserves, which enables them to make additional loans to the government or the private sector. So we're seeing this huge expansion of government debt, leading to a huge expansion of money in circulation. This is inflation. Now, monetary inflation eventually must result in price inflation. And we're seeing the prices of energy and food and other necessities increase. The credit commons means that I and all my fellow U.S. citizens are responsible for all of that government debt, not only directly because we are part of the United States, but also indirectly because we accept dollars in payment for real goods and services. So we've allowed the credit commons to be privatized by a banking cartel headed by a central bank, and this is true in virtually every country around the world. The central banking system has spread to every country around the world. The prototype model for it was the Bank of England that was founded in 1694. And immediately after the American Revolution, the first Bank of the United States was our first central bank that was basically a replica of the Bank of England. And that's a bit of history that I talk about in my book. First Bank of the United States, the second Bank of the United States, and finally the Federal Reserve.
It's very
becoming,
and it's also, I just want to touch on that. It's a very interesting battle that goes on between, you know, the different forces wanting to keep the banking free and those that wanted the central bank there. It's a fascinating account that you give in the book. It's a short synopsis, but I'm getting into film, I guess, a short description, but it's a wonderful read. Could you just do a little bit, just get it out a little bit for people?
well, Andrew Jackson was really one of my heroes because initially the Bank of the United States was chartered for 20 years. That charter ran out in 1816, and no, 1812, I guess it was. And we went for a few years without a central bank, and then the second Bank of the United States was created by an act of Congress, again with a 20-year charter, which was due to expire during the Jackson administration. And the president of the second Bank of the United States went to get the bank rechartered early. He thought he had congressional support lined up, and in fact he did. Congress passed the bill to recharter the second Bank of the United States, but Andrew Jackson vetoed it. So he single-handedly killed the central bank in the United States for a short period of years until the Civil War. This is an important chapter in U.S. history that most people aren't aware of. But Jackson said that we had in this country a private power, the banking power specifically, that was vying with the government for control, and he was determined to put an end to it.
Right.
So what's happened with the institution of the Federal Reserve Bank is we've recreated this banking cartel, which really wields the power in the United States. The government is pretty much subject to the banking power. And if you look at the people that are in the government and control the government, for example, the current Treasury Secretary came from Goldman Sachs. The previous Treasury Secretary came from Goldman Sachs. And this is fairly typical. The big Wall Street banks basically put their own people in charge of the U.S. Treasury and the financial system. But they also control the government as well. I think Congress people are pretty much put in by the Wall Street interests also. They're all pretty much beholden to the same interests.
Right. Yeah, well, our governor of the Bank of Canada is also a Goldman Sachs guy.
So we have this around the world, you know. We have the trappings of democracy, but the actual fact of the matter is that our governments are controlled by private interests who control the money and banking system. You can't separate economics from politics. And the way in which you control politics is by controlling money and banking. I give a quote in my book from Professor Carroll Quigley, who was one of Bill Clinton's mentors at Georgetown University. Carroll Quigley was an advisor to presidents and various government agencies throughout his career, and he wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope back in 1966. And in that book he said, "The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching plan, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Their secret is that they have annexed from governments, monarchies, and republics the power to create the world's money." And that's exactly the situation that we have today. So people have to claim their money power, as Regal said. The power to give each other credit is basically the money power that we have in our own hands.
Right.
And by organizing direct credit clearing systems like the commercial trade exchanges and local mutual credit clearing systems, we can reduce our dependence on the banks, on conventional political money, and become independent of those power structures and take our own power back through our power to give each other credit.
Right. It's really beautiful, and I never thought I'd be saying that about economic thought, but I'm a believer. In your book, you refer to the emerging butterfly society, and I just wanted you to touch on that because we talked a little bit about hope, and maybe we could end off with that.
Yes, I think this is more than just a metaphor. I think it's what's actually happening. Society worldwide is going through a metamorphic change, and the main aspect of that that's so easy to see is the economic aspect. If you look at the caterpillar, its function is to eat and to grow, and that's really all it does. It eats and it grows and it eats and it grows, but at some point it reaches a maximum and it stops growing. And the skin of the caterpillar hardens into a shell, and it goes into the chrysalis stage. In that stage, the caterpillar body breaks down into what you might call a nutrient soup. And the imaginal cells that were the butterfly program, they were in the caterpillar body from the very beginning. But these cells now become active, and they join up, and they begin to form the organs of the new butterfly. And they feed off the accumulated nutrients of the decaying caterpillar. That's what we're going through today, I think, worldwide. We've had the caterpillar economy, which has been growth-oriented. It's been basically exploiting resources and accumulating wealth in the form of finished goods and other products that we use. But now we've reached the point where the finite limits of the planet have been reached. We can no longer continue that process. So I think we're entering the chrysalis stage of this process, where economic growth is going to stop. We can see all of the institutions of the caterpillar age are disintegrating and failing to function according to their design purpose. And new systems and structures are emerging. So we're seeing a lot of hopeful signs, like the transition movement, various sustainability groups popping up, permaculture, social networking, community currencies and cashless exchange systems, farmers markets, a trend toward relocalization, community-supported agriculture, and peer-to-peer networks of all kinds. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I think when you think about the behavior of the butterfly, it's a symbiotic behavior. The butterfly, instead of devouring plants and destroying them, helps them to reproduce, because the butterfly goes around and collects pollen and in the process helps to pollinate the plants and propagate them. So I like that image as something we can look forward to as we go through this transition. And the transition, I think, will be painful for those who try to hold on to the caterpillar economy, but those who can embrace the butterfly, I think will find it an exciting and rewarding time.
Right, and and I got to say thanks again for joining us today. It's been fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. And the workshops we're doing, it's going to be fabulous. And so I thought what we could do is bring up Tom's website.
Reinventingmoney.com.
Yeah, and we're going to play some music again, but...
actually, you might bring up the blog also, beyondmoney.net.
Okay.
That's the one that I keep more up to date.
Okay, beyondmoney.net. Okay. We're on it.
Yeah. And thank you, Tom. It's been a great conversation. Look forward to actually everybody can look forward because they can participate when you do come to Toronto.
And we're going to talk. I'll talk a little bit about the seminars. So we're doing a couple seminars. The first one is on Saturday from 10:30 to 12:30. That's 2 hours. It's geared for individuals and community groups. Highly recommend that you read Tom's book. We're going to have lots of them there, and they're available, but you should read it before you come to the seminar and look at his website and stuff. And also on Sunday, we're doing a seminar, and it's really geared for the Toronto dollar businesses and, trying to set up, as Tom was talking about, an alternative credit clearing model here in Toronto. Very exciting stuff. And we're going to also talk a little bit about the Toronto dollar as well. Maybe we can rework that a little bit with Tom's help. He can give us some ideas to improve it. But really happy to have you come up, Tom. Looking forward to it.
Well, I'm excited to be coming to Toronto. And you might also mention, Glenn, my other book, the previous one, Money, which gets into the nuts and bolts details of how to do community currency. And that's one that you'll have.
Money, Understanding and Creating Alternatives to Legal Tender. We have ordered both of those books, and they're available. Just send an email to the Mint Film Festival website. That's www.mintff.org. We have lots of copies of those books.
All right, so we're going to take a break now. Come back with Timothy Phillips from Healing on the Danforth as Liquid Lunch continues a special Toronto dollar edition. We will be right back.
Thanks for joining us, Tom.
You're most welcome. Bye-bye.
I want to wander the streets with you and find my soul under electric photo light.
Are we clear?
And find my soul.
Okay, I'll just sign off then.
All I need is a motor car. I don't own a jet